Get ready to raise a glass and turn up the volume because Drink Champs is back. Join hosts NORE and DJ EFN as they drink, laugh, and chat with some of the biggest names in hip-hop and pop culture with some of the most legendary guests like Derek Jeter, A$AP Rocky, and Kevin Hart. Drink Champs has got it all. Tune in and join the conversation with Drink Champs on the Interval Presents Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts.
With Progressive's Name Your Price tool, you can find options that fit your budget, because giving you options is the right thing to do.
Oh yeah, like when I hold the door for someone. Sure, it may be weird if I don't time it right, and they're a little too far away, and now they're running, and we're both asking ourselves, is it worth it to run instead of just, letting them open their own door?
But still, it's the right thing to do. So get options based on your needs with Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and third-party insurers. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're now on Red Circle as well as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Also, check out 5reasonsports.com. Spell that one out. You get content without a paywall. And check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. The second half props are up on PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Of course, not second half, but it's like the last 20-something games of the season. So you can project how many times certain NBA players will go over certain stat markers. It's pretty cool, actually. And you can also, of course, play the other sports that they have up there, including NHL and MMA. Go to PrizePicks, Google Play Store, Apple App Store, or prizepicks.com. But here's the key thing. Use that code, F-I-V-E. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. And now, tonight's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. We continue to get you ready for this home stretch of the season, where the Miami Heat will start on the road with 3 games, but then they're home for 6 against Eastern Conference teams that are all kind of in the mix after that. But of course, they start with Milwaukee and Charlotte in a back-to-back. Check out our recent episodes, most of which were about Kevin Love. We just did an X Factor episode, a lot of Tyler Hero talk in that one. This one's a little bit more general. The floor plan, I've got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at BradyHawk305. And I've got Greg Sylvander. You can follow at Greg Sylvander. We're just going to talk about the high-end expectations of this team. So I know some people are going to clip this and say we're sunshine pumping and all that. Well, we're kind of doing that on purpose. Like, there has to be a purpose to watch the rest of this season. Like, if you just think this thing is going to flame out, in the play-in or the first round, then, okay, what are we really doing here? And I've said that I think that this high-end expectation of this team is second round at this stage. I don't think that Kevin Love and Cody Zeller acquisitions move the needle that much in that respect, even if you get Oladipo and Kyle Lowry playing well for this team in the backcourt and add depth there as well. I still think this looks to me like a second round out, but maybe I could be convinced. So we're going to talk a little bit about the high-end expectations for this team, and I'm going to go to Greg first. Like, if I was to say to you, like, if everything broke right and what would have to break right, how far could this team go? Because nobody was really projecting the Heat to get to the finals in the bubble. They came in as a 5th seed. They were actually kind of a 4th, but they dropped a game and dropped to Indiana and ended up dropping back to the 5 seed and then won a 4 series. But what I would say, like, best case scenario here, you would say what?
Essentially, you're going to need dominant performances from your best players. Shaquille O'Neal and Dwayne Wade. You're going to need your mercurial point guard in Jason Williams to really have a great playoff run and play big in some of the big series against the best teams later.
Okay, stop it. What are you doing here? We're 06?
I'm showing you the path. No,
oh, okay. Go ahead.
No. So anyway, I shall pivot, but you got the point of where I'm heading here is that I'm starting off by saying that we've seen them do this before. So anybody who comes and says that this is going to be a sunshine pumping episode, there's precedent for a team that's been a little uneven all season coming together. So point made as I go on, the team catches fire and spends, let's say, a good 2 months shooting 40% from deep. You have Jimmy and Bam playing at a high level. Tyler Hero is the third wheel and shows that he can obviously rise to the occasion against heightened awareness from the defense and such, and adjustments, and that the role players are going to step up. Your big men, like we could go through what the best case scenario is. This is the path, that either a 3-6 matchup against Philadelphia or a 4-5 matchup against Cleveland, or if Brooklyn gets mixed in there. I think either one of those series Miami could take advantage of. And then you just have to hope your guys are right. And you go against those top teams and you do it the way that the 06 team had to sometimes grind it out, or even this last iteration of the Heat that Jimmy Butler, it was a 3-pointer away, right? The way they grinded themselves to that game 7, that's the way you got to approach it. But there's precedent.
Well, there is precedent for expulsion teams being really good in March. I think what's weird about this now is that there's so little of the regular season left. Typically, when you get out of the All-Star break, or it used to be, there were like 35, 40 games left. Like, it was pretty close to the halfway point of the season. Now we're talking about, this isn't even a third of the season now. So there's not as much runway here to make a dramatic change to your season as there was before. But you mentioned the 06 team. Now, there was a coaching change in there. There was Shaq getting healthy. Okay, so let's acknowledge that. But also there's the 15-16 team that I talk a lot about, which Chris Bosh actually, the worst possible thing happened at the All-Star break in Toronto, which is that Chris Bosh found out that he had a blood clot again. And then you lost him for the remainder of the season. There was distractions related to that, and the Bosh crew was unhappy. People forget this now, was unhappy at the Heat for not putting him out there, to the point that they were wearing T-shirts in the crowd in Toronto. And yet the Heat just kept kind of winning, like with Luol Deng at the 4, moving in Joe Johnson and getting to the second round of playoffs. 7th game may have gotten further if Whiteside hadn't been hurt. I mean, let's just be honest about that. As much as Hassan got a lot of bleep from us and others, that they would have had a chance, and maybe Justice Winslow wasn't playing center in a game 7. So I guess, Brady, there are precedents to this. There's also the precedent of the 16-17 team that went 30-11 the second half of the season. Like, this has happened more times. There's a precedent of the 03-04 team that made a heavy run in the second half of the year behind Dwayne Wade, Lamar Odom and that group, and got to 42-40 and then the second round of playoffs. So that is a lot of sunshine pumping. So you tell me, like, what is the path here to this being a memorable close to the season?
Yeah, in terms of like best case scenario stuff, I think Greg mentioning the shooting is probably the biggest thing, because that is the biggest up and down factor here. And I think that's the thing that could kind of change the outlook of this team. Like, that can what put them into the same category they were basically in last year. If they're shooting around 40% from 3 and they all of a sudden catch fire, which is not very likely when you look at the fact that they're at the literal bottom of the league, but we've seen it before with shooting in general. So it's like not like impossible. Like, if they could just catch fire with their role players, what their best players can do. In terms of best case scenario stuff come playoff time, he was going through some of the bracket stuff. Like, Philly and Cleveland are probably going to be some type of 3-4, and it could flip. Cleveland could end up getting the 3 maybe, and they could flip back and forth. But either way, they're probably going to be the 4 home court teams. It's just about, I think, getting into that 5 range. And let's just say you get a Cleveland in the first round. We talk about best case scenario. Best case scenario would be Philly taking care of Milwaukee beforehand. Like, that would be best case scenario in general. But, maybe you actually, we haven't talked about it from this angle, but like, let's just say, I know Boston and Milwaukee could flip as well. And I know we're really looking ahead. But I've been making the case, and I've asked this like on a lot of different things. We were talking about this on Playback. Who would you rather play, Boston or Milwaukee? I kind of believe Boston kind of runs the rest of the season out, and I think they probably end up in that 1 seed.
Agreed. So,
like, from my perspective, I think you'd rather see Milwaukee, and I keep saying that I think you'd rather see Milwaukee than Boston. So, like,
agree.
And you're not re-angling yourself. You're not trying to aim for a 6 seed, but like, would you rather a 6 seed than a 5 seed? Because then you can kind of aim for it in that way. Like, it's a conversation to be had, and both Milwaukee and Boston. I think that's why you keep hearing second round out, is because of those 2 teams and the way they look. But Milwaukee has not been healthy. I think they feel more comfortable against that drop with most of their players. You let Jimmy Butler figure that stuff out. So we'll talk about schematic stuff, I guess, when we get there. But in terms of best case scenario, I guess that would be it. And I'll say the last thing in terms of best case scenario is I think it really is just Jimmy Butler. And like I swear we've had this exact storyline play out so many times in Jimmy Butler's Heat tenure, where we sit here around this exact time and we say, is Jimmy Butler breaking down? Does he not care anymore? Did teams figure him out? Like there was a point last year, I think there was like a game against Milwaukee where he looked absolutely horrible. Well, he can't do this anymore. The teams are figuring him out. They're closing off the rim. They're going to force him to take jumpers. How is he going to do this? And then he goes in the playoffs and goes into that mode. Like now that Nets game and the Dallas game this year, those two games that we walk away from, we're like, oh, teams have figured out Jimmy. They start doubling him. Oh, Jimmy's kind of hobbling around offensively. And now we're in the 20-game final stretch of the regular season. And it feels like this is the time where every single time, this is when Jimmy Butler does his thing. So in terms of if we're going to sunshine pump anything, it should be the fact that this organization is and will trust Jimmy Butler no matter what. And there's no reason at this point, you could talk the whole reason we talk about getting him help, but there should be no questions about Jimmy Butler down the stretch of this season. We could talk about getting him in at a certain minute mark. It doesn't really matter. I think that's kind of the factor here. It's like, you just got to see get Jimmy Butler into the dance and just see what he can do.
Well, we talked a lot about Tyler Hero, and the one thing I forgot to kind of get into with the Hero discussion that you and I had, Greg, the other day, is that so much of the Heat's success over the course of the franchise's history has been about what their third guy has provided. I go all the way back to the discussions back in the late 90s where it was, okay, is Jamal Mashburn going to replicate the things he does in the regular season in the postseason? And for the most part, until he left Miami and went against Miami, he did not. Okay. And then there were these conversations, as we went forward, to a certain degree, Eddie Jones kind of became a number 3 guy on the team, that 04-05 team. And then when Dwayne went out, Eddie could not step up. And then we look forward and, the big 3 era, that was a conversation about Chris Bosh quite a bit, where it would seem like, Chris would make a greater impact when the others were off the floor, but not on. And sometimes he wouldn't win his matchup, whether it was against Garnett or against Hibbert. And that's the way we characterized it. And so I kind of look at that this way. To me, there are not a lot of big 3s in the NBA anymore. Like it's mostly, 2-man teams, essentially.
2.75s.
Right, exactly. Like we don't see the big 3. We see 2 guys. That's why what Phoenix has put together looks kind of frightening to people, because if we don't know what Chris Paul is a true number 3 guy anymore, full number 3, but you have Durant and you have Booker at the top. And then, you look at obviously the Clippers, it's really, we're talking 2, right? Like Westbrook that's not a big 3. Everybody's trying to make teams into big 3s. They're not. Denver doesn't really have a big 3, so to speak, right? Memphis doesn't have a big 3.
No.
Even Boston does not have a big 3. They've got a big 2. They've got a really good supporting cast. Milwaukee is the closest, I think, to having that, but it's always been a health issue with Middleton, at times. And I don't think people look at that team the same way as the previous big 3s, but they probably are the closest to that of any of the current teams. I don't think that Philadelphia characterizes. I think Maxey, everybody's been trying to throw him in that mix, but hasn't been healthy enough and hasn't stepped up. And again, with Harden, I don't even know if it's a big 2 at this stage. So that's why if you look at it, it's kind of like, okay, when I look at the best case scenario for this team, I kind of come back to yesterday's podcast, which is like, if you can get a Tyler Hero who takes a leap in the postseason and supports Jimmy and Bam in that way, then this team's ceiling rises, okay? Because I think we know now Bam has risen his own ceiling, and so that's where he's at, and you got to know what Jimmy's going to be. And so if that's the case, and yes, if you could draw Milwaukee, let's say, and that's a team that Tyler is comfortable against, and he can have a series, and you have these other now kind of plug-and-play guys, and let's say they get a little something out of Love. Caleb Martin more comfortable in his other role, and he and Gabe and Max can play looser together. Then could you beat a Milwaukee in a playoff series? Is Milwaukee unbeatable? I don't think they are. I think they're very good. I don't think they're necessarily as good as maybe their championship team, but I think they're reasonably close to it. But I think this could be an Eastern Conference Finals team. So that's sort of how I look at it. But I also look at this schedule coming out of the break, and I'm like, they could go 4-5. And a lot of this happy talk could be dampened very quickly. Like, this is a road trip. Let's say Charlotte. They just lost in Charlotte. They just lost to Milwaukee, okay, and likely are going to lose there again. So, and then they come home And they're seeing Cleveland, they're seeing Philadelphia, and they're seeing New York. And Atlanta has caught them sometimes, or at least did recently. So I guess, Greg, when I look at it that way, I'm kind of like these first few games out of the break are going to tell you a lot, I believe.
23 games. I keep coming back to that number. And you know what it is? It's because I keep looking at the Miami Heat rest of season props on PrizePicks. Use the code 5 to get your initial deposit matched up to $100. And it shows the Heat's number of games on all of the Heat player props. And it's that 23 number, right? And it's, this is 23 playoff games, because when you're now trimmed down, I don't think the Heat play another team on the road from the West. I don't even know who from the West that comes to Miami. There's probably a couple left to come through, maybe. I'd have to look at the schedule. This is really where the Eastern Conference bloodbath begins. And like, you're going to have teams who are right next to each other in the standings, moving up and down. Every game's going to matter. Tiebreakers are going to be crazy. And this is going to be the most frenetic end to a regular season heading into this play-in that we've ever had. And so, like, to a point, I think that it helps. And Brady just chimed in with 3 more Western Conference matchups, and I don't think those are on the road. So, like, yeah, this is all about the East to end the season, and it's the playoffs before the playoffs. And I think that actually ultimately helps Miami, because they tend to play up to the competition, but also play up to the magnitude of the game or the moment. At least that's how I like to absorb this information. So I'm thinking that they're going to come out and be ready to approach these last 23, with an eye towards, making some real noise.
All right, I'm going to let Brady close here after the break. Before we do, I want to mention another sponsor, 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's Water Cleanup of Florida. If you got a water leak, you can't find where it's coming from, you're dealing with water or mold damage in your home or business, call Water Cleanup of Florida. That's 954-579-0356. Michael, Robert, their team will take care of all types of leak detection issues, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Water Cleanup, fully licensed, insured, certified to provide the one-stop shopping that busy homeowners and business owners require. They're based in Boca, but they can serve Dade and Broward counties as well as the rest of Palm Beach. So call Michael on his personal cell, 954-579-0356, 954-579-0356, or WCUFL.com.
And now another no-brainer money-saving tip from Progressive.
It looks like your luggage is over 50 pounds. Is there anything you can take out?
Oh, yeah. Let me just toss all these $20 bills.
Great. Let me grab you a trash can.
Stop. Instead of throwing money away, move some clothes into a carry-on. And here's a better tip from Progressive on how not to waste money. Don't pay too much for car insurance. Drivers who switch and save could save hundreds. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary.
If you got
the schmutz, they got the guts. I had to sneak in there, Ethan.
Sneaking in there, and the reason I delayed there a little bit is trying to figure out how to set this up, but I appreciate you jumping in, because I wasn't asleep at the switch. I'll let Brady close here. I'm going to let Brady have the guts here. Forget Greg. Give me a finals scenario for the Miami Heat.
A finals scenario
meaning they get there. Like they did 2 years ago or 3 years ago, like they almost did last year.
Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero just absolutely kind of play to a similar level that they are right now into the postseason and kind of elevate. Like, that's kind of the run. And maybe along the way, like I said before, like a Milwaukee or a Boston gets beat before you match up with them. Like, that's kind of like the easiest thing to mention. But the last thing I wanted to close with to mention was the fact that we've seen this story play out as well in terms of when we talk about Eric Spoelstra and kind of the final stretch and the stuff he does in March. The reason why I feel like this is so important, other than the fact that they need to win these games, other than the fact I was just looking at their record because I was seeing all the home games they have in March. They're 19-10 this season at home, and they're 13-17 on the road. So, like, getting some home games, they've been pretty good at home, and I don't know what that means for the fact that they're not going to have home court advantage. That makes things a little bit tougher. But either way, the final stretch of this season, we've seen this last season when they made their run into, or let's go back even to the bubble. When they made their run before the bubble, they made an acquisition, changed things up. They had things new. They headed into the bubble and they made a run with Jay Crowder and Iguodala. You look back to last season, things got a little bit stale. There was fights on the sideline. Like, things were looking like they were not going in a good direction. They changed things up. They took Duncan out of the rotation, basically. They put Max Strus in the starting lineup. They changed rotations, like kind of patterns to kind of put Tyler and Bam together more. And look what that ended up leading to in the postseason and into this season. Now this season, you see a Kevin Love kind of an acquisition. You see the fact that I think Gabe Vincent or Victor Oladipo are probably in the starting backcourt next to Tyler Hero heading into the postseason. So this has played out before, where I think if we're going to eye anything and talk about sunshine pumping and trying to make a run, I think we need to really just look at the moves they make down the stretch of the season in terms of the shifts. Because as much as I always say on here, like the fact that you need like a change of scenery of some kind on the basketball court, off the court with roster, change of scenery can happen within the roster and just kind of shifting things that they have in past years. So the thing I'm watching is to see just how far they go with it, because we could see if Kevin Love starts or not at the start. We could see what they do with Kyle Lowry when he returns, if he's going to be off the bench, if he's going to start. I just think they need to shift things up, and they've done it before, and that's what sparked so many runs. So that's kind of the big thing I think I'll be watching, I guess, down the stretch of the season. That can lead into, I guess, a big-time playoff run.
What would you say, Greg? The guts on the guts scale, where's Brady?
Brady got the guts because I know he can draw up the plays that'll get them there. This is matchups. If they get the right matchups, they can advance. If everyone's healthy, Tyler Hero shows up. I felt like Brady has the guts. We have the guts. Best case scenarios. A lot of other people are probably going to be talking about the worst case scenarios. So we bring you the positivity on this episode.
All right. Well, on this particular episode, I'll let you guys get negative over the weekend if they get swept in Milwaukee and Charlotte, because I'm not going to be around for those two. Thanks to Greg.
Giannis, by the way, which means they'll probably drop that initial game.
That's exactly right. Right. Well, no, they did beat them twice at home without Giannis. So this is the third time this year they've caught a non-Giannis Bucks. Thanks, Brady. Thanks, Greg. Thanks to Water Cleanup of Florida. Thanks to PrizePicks. Playback over the weekend. Check it out. It's going to be posted on the top of my Twitter feed over at 5 Reasons Sports. Join us during the games and come hang out. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.